Okay, so we are just going to get started, and we may have some people pop in here. But I wanted to thank Maria and the other people who will probably join throughout, and then especially the people who are going to watch the video after it is posted, because we are recording this. And this is the first virtual event in a series about e-commerce. We're going to be doing deep dives into that. We have a ton of very talented makers in Columbia County, a lot of people who are looking for ways to, get distribution for their products, moving beyond the farmer's market, as we like to say. And so I wanted to just say a quick thing. If people aren't familiar when they watch a video about GRO Greater is a Columbia County initiative that's part of a national network of rural initiatives to help build economies and communities that are committed to strong entrepreneurial economic development. So GRO Greater, which is pilot program in St. Helens, was started in 2022 with funding from the Ford Family Foundation, and its focus is shining a light on local entrepreneurs and innovation. Our mission here is to illuminate the path to a vibrant local economy by empowering entrepreneurs like you with support, such as with Tanya, connections and resources that you need to thrive. So my name is Nicole, and I work on community and communications, and thank you for being here. So we want to get started. So I want to introduce Tanya, our esteemed speaker, who is dialing in all the way from Southern Oregon. So Tanya is a former owner of Canard. Am I saying that right? Canard Labs built a thriving business by handcrafting soap, skincare products, and candles. Under her leadership, expanded to include 2 storefronts, a robust online retail presence, and distribution in over 800 shops worldwide. After selling the business and relocating cross-country, Tanya transitioned to her role as an Entrepreneur Program Manager for the South Coast Development Council. Let me just admit Jason here really quick. Where she oversees the Southwest Oregon Innovation Hub and the Business Incubator at Southwestern Oregon Community College, covering Coos, Curry, and Douglas counties. And she now channels her passion for business development into supporting new innovative startups in the region and beyond, because she is dialing in to help us here. So, hi, Jason. Welcome to the chat. I said we're just going to get started, and if people want to dial in, they can. Otherwise, we're recording this, and people will be able to visit after. So I just did a quick background on Tanya, and I think if people have questions, put them in the chat, and then other than that, I think we'll just jump in, if that sounds good for you. All right. Yeah. So, Tanya, there's a lot we're going to cover, but and I'm going to mute myself in between here. But let's just start with kind of a highlight of your background, your path to accidental or intentional entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it's pretty long. I'm going to try to do just a quick overview, but I'll go back to college. Right? We'll pretend like I'm a lot younger than I am. So I went away to school for musical theater and psychology because I thought that that's what I wanted to do, but I ended up being the world's best bartender because I'm a good performer, and also I would listen to people's problems, right? So from there, I met my husband, who is a chef. We traveled all over the country. We lived in a lot of different places. So I essentially just adapted to everywhere that we moved. I wore many, many different hats, worked for Walt Disney World, worked for Whole Foods Market, got a lot of management experience. We ended up in Chicago, and after many, many years, we had my son. And when he came around, things kind of changed a little bit. And I'm going to try to tell this story very quickly, because I'm going to just try to say why I chose soap, why I got into that. So for many years, I had helped others build their own businesses by working 60 to 80-hour work weeks and kind of running their offices, running their businesses. And so when Liam, my son, was born, I decided that if I was going to work 80 hours a week, I was going to do it for myself. I just didn't know what that thing was going to be. So at the time, my husband's brother came to visit with his wife and their small child. And around this time, so we're talking about 2012, this was a minute ago. And around this time, I don't know if you remember, but The Walking Dead was super duper famous. So, and actually like good back then. So we were talking about the zombie apocalypse, drinking too much wine. And the brother-in-law had essentially said, what are you going to do, Tanya? Sing and dance for people? And I don't know. I just think you'll be the first one to die. So I was super offended. Could have been my fourth glass of wine. Could just be because he's kind of a jerk. But I had decided, okay, well, that kind of sucked. So about a week later, another brother came to visit, and he's like the smart brother, right? So I was complaining to Craig about Sean, and can you believe that he said this? What a jerk. And Craig, very, very wisely, was sitting there and being very serious about this apocalyptic conversation. And he said, when you think about it, medicine won't really be a thing. So you really kind of need soap. Like you need to stay clean. Hygiene will be very, very important. And I'm like, you know what? That's a really good thought. So I think I'm going to win the apocalypse and learn how to make soap. And then when I was telling my husband about this, he goes, you know what? You should probably sell that soap. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. And then it turned into this whole thing for the last 12 years that I had been doing before I sold it. So within that time, I started off with only 2 different types of soaps on Etsy. And as I started making more and people were asking for more things, different products, again, my wise husband was like, we have a farmer's market. And at the time we were living in Tennessee outside of Nashville. So he was like, you should probably sell at the farmer's market. And I'm like, all right, fine, let's do this. What do I need? And I got a couple tables and I got some tablecloths and we got a little tent and or canopy or whatever it's called. And so I was selling at the farmer's market, and the amount of money I was making there for products that, looking back, not super great looking. The display that I had was a bit much, but I was still doing it. People were giving me money for this thing that I was making. And he ended up getting a different job right here in Coos Bay. So we actually came back to Coos Bay. We'd lived here one other time. Lived in Bandon, which is even smaller and kind of crazy. So a girl from New York, like moving over here to very, very small town Oregon was a lot for me. But anyway, so we came back and I was still running the Etsy shop. At the time, I'd opened up a secondary e-commerce site. And the reason why I did that is because when you purchase something from Etsy, you're purchasing it from Etsy. You're not purchasing it from Canard Labs, which was the name of my business. So I really wanted to stand out and have a little bit of brand recognition outside of Etsy. That took some time to build, and we'll get there. But we had lived in Oregon, I think at this point now, for about 2 years. And Clay, my husband, and we talked about this at length, and I was like, hey, let's just open a brick and mortar store. And we did. So we opened a brick and mortar store in North Bend. And I got to tell you, it seems like it's something that we can't do, that it's so unattainable. But as long as you know your numbers and you know what you're making and you're able to sustain that, then it's possible. And it's not as hard as it may seem, because I remember thinking that this was a mountain I was never going to surpass. And then I ended up opening another store 2 years later. So it does happen. It's easier than you might think. And sometimes it's harder, because we also tried to open in Eugene and we were thinking about Portland, and then the pandemic kind of hit and everything changed. But this is a very long-winded way of saying that we grew and grew and grew. I grew to different revenue streams. So I was doing a lot of wholesale. I was doing a lot of private label. So if you're unaware, private label is when you are making your own product for other makers, right? So I would make a lot of soap for other soap makers that just needed to fill in, but they would put their own labeling, own branding on it. So we did that all over the world, and the pandemic hit, the shops closed, and we pivoted directly to selling online. And so at that point, I didn't even have an Etsy store. I probably closed my Etsy store about 6 years in because I was doing more work through my social media marketing, which grew to be very large over the course of 12 years. If you're starting now, it's a bit harder, to be honest, just because the market is a bit oversaturated after the pandemic. Everybody and their brother and sister opened up stores online. So anyway, it is possible. We ended up selling it in January. And as a way to kind of give back and do more, I applied for this position at the South Coast Development Council here in Coos Bay. And they were looking for a Business Incubator Manager. That's originally what I was hired for. So I'm still currently running the Business Incubator and seeking funding for a large co-working space here in Coos Bay. But then I'm also running our innovation hub for Coos, Curry, and Douglas County. So I kind of have my hat or my hands in everything, which is kind of, the story of my life. So that's where we're at. But as far as e-commerce is concerned, I've kind of been there, done that, and lots of different platforms. And there's good and bad for all of it right now. And it's also kind of knowing where we're at, like what everything looks like right now. And as I'd already mentioned, things are still pretty saturated after the pandemic. So it's kind of how do you navigate that at this point? So, and now I'm going to stop because I feel like I've been talking forever.
It's a lot of ground. You make it sound very easy the way you blow through that, but that definitely, we know it's not easy to build a business and then to sell it, especially all the distribution channels you created. Now, did you self-identify as an entrepreneur?
So my speaker's going in and out, and I didn't really hear that question. So,
okay. Did you self-identify as an entrepreneur?
That is a great question. No, I went through all kinds of crazy imposter syndrome. I didn't actually see myself as a business owner until I sold the business. So we're talking 12 years later, I can now identify as a business owner because I put it behind me. But while I was in it, I felt like, what the hell is wrong with people? Why are they buying my things? This seems silly to me. And not only are they buying my things, but people all over the world are buying my things. Are they insane? So it's a thing also when you actually physically make your product, you put like a little bit of yourself into each thing that you make. So it becomes very personal. And I never really got there until it was over. And then I was like, wait a second, I just did this thing for about 12 years. And it's kind of a big deal because also I grew up in a military family, and you're told you are not a special flower. Anybody can do anything that you do, and everyone's easily replaceable. Well, now as a grown-up, I know that that's nonsense. So all of these things kind of were fighting against myself in my head for many, many years. But, the whole 12 years I was doing it, I was a business owner. The moment you put anything online, the moment you take any kind of money for a thing that you make or a thing that you're selling, you're a business owner. The moment you sign up for your LLC or what have you, you're a business owner. And it's actually something that I like to tell people now because I wish that somebody was telling me that then. And I just kind of worked through it. So. Yeah.
And then when you started, what were kind of the steps that you took with deciding your actual product line and just the creation of that? There's probably, I don't know, was there permits? I mean, just how did you go about getting it off the ground and picking a platform and the logistics kind of back end?
So 2012 was definitely a different climate than it is right now. The way that I started is I had a bunch of friends on Facebook, right? And I put it out there that, hey, I'm making all this soap and I'm making some lip balms, and I'd love it if I could get, and I don't know why it was this. Oh, it's because I had exactly this number when I cut up all of this soap that I had just made. I had said that I'm going to give away 36 packages, and it's going to be, I need likes and followers on my new business page that I just created on Facebook. So I'm giving away 2 bars of soap and 2 different lip balms for the first 36 people to sign up and like my page, right? And so I got that in probably less than 24 hours, and I stayed true to that. I made those things. They were watching the pictures as I was making it. I was gathering more and more people. I mean, they weren't getting anything out of it, but they were waiting for the launch of the Etsy store, which is just a lot of promotion before you even do a thing. thing. And I probably wouldn't recommend this, but I hadn't even made a batch of soap before I did this. Anyway, so I made the 2 batches of soap. I chopped them up. I made the lip balms. I packaged them out, and on my own dime. Now, granted, it wasn't thousands of dollars, but I still spent probably close to $400 to $500 of my own money. But like I had said, I'd worked my entire life for other people, so we had a little bit of money. But $400 to $500 is not that much when you think about that's what I had for all of the ingredients. It's what I had for all of my tools that I needed. And something that I teach now with our business owners is you start small. You don't have to have, I think at the end, I had 124 different products that I was making and selling. You don't have to start with 124 products. I had 4. I had 2 lip balms and 2 different types of soap. And so I sent all of these packets out. The people that I sent them to gave them to friends, gave them to family. And then, orders started slowly coming through. And in that first year, I officially opened August 3rd of 2012. And in the very first year, I had done $5,000 on Etsy, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was like part-time. And I was still dealing with a very, very colicky child who wanted to kill me, I think, back then, with how ridiculous he was being as a baby. But so doing that, making the soap, doing the things, but a lot of it is, something that I'd call it now is more like focus group, right? You're giving all of this free product out. You haven't done this before. You want some feedback. So the great news is I was getting all of this feedback from people as well, telling me the good, the bad, the ugly. And as far as developing the product line, I literally listened to the customer, because as I was doing this, I am not somebody who loves going into Lush. I do not like going to Bath and Body Works. I've never been that girl where I like smelly things. So to me, I thought it was hilarious that this is what I ended up doing for a huge chunk of my life, was making these types of products. However, I was very artistic. So all of that singing and dancing, I kind of put into colors and fragrances into the things that I was creating. Literally everything. I would have like another little focus group. I would make little Facebook groups of about 6 people, because 36 is just far too many. That was costing me too much money. So about 5 to 6 different people I would use, like kind of my most rabid customers, and 1 new person that I would welcome in. Somebody new that would like my page and said, you know what, people have been asking for this thing. I'm going to make it, and I want to hear your honest feedback. And so I probably did that for the first few years, because after that, people, as I'm sure anybody that has never ever been a maker and works at a farmer's market, people are very loose with their opinions. So they will tell you what they think you should do, because that was something that I remember hearing. It was like nails on a chalkboard. Do you know what you should do? Because that happens a lot when you have your own business. And you know what? I would say a third of the time, they were really good opinions, or they would help me make my next decision for the next thing I wanted to do. But then also, like I tell my people, you might not be your own customer, so you have to listen to what your people want. If your people are constantly telling you, hey, I'd really love it if I had some sort of skincare line because your skin's really nice. How do you get your skin to look like that? And I'm like, well, here are the things that I do. And I'm like, wait a second, but I can do that for you. So that when we ended up launching the skincare line, well, that just made perfect sense, because I did not have great skin when I was younger. I had like terrible acne, but I don't anymore. And I was able to help people through it. The other thing too, is that obviously when you have a store, you need to have a little bit of a personality. So you have to kind of put yourself out there. For many, many years, I called myself an introverted extrovert, but now I'm just fully owning that extrovert in me, because you just become that over the years, especially when you are kind of your product, especially at the very beginning. So I feel like I went all over the place, because entrepreneurs, we see shiny things and we go off on tangents, but
It's true.
maybe I answered that.
It's true. It's very squirrel mentality sometimes. Now the steps, I mean, again, you make it sound so easy. You're like, I just did this and then I did this, but it can be overwhelming for folks, right? And there are so many companies, so many products. So discovery can be a challenge as a new brand. So what were some of the, I guess, sort of pivot points for you? You mentioned you started with Etsy. And then
Mhm.
you decided your next step in your brand building was a branded website. And
Yeah, so
what was kind of your progression there to moving beyond the Facebook marketplace, farmers market kind of situation?
so back then there was not a Facebook marketplace. There is now, but there wasn't back then. And quite frankly, I never utilized it because that's not where I was anymore. I was past that. But when I did start, I started on Etsy because it's just kind of where the makers went at the time. And also, Etsy wasn't completely overcrowded like it is right now. I mean, 12 years ago, it was a completely different place, so I could be seen. But if it wasn't for me doing all of that outreach prior, I still wouldn't have had any traction because places like Etsy, places like eBay, there are other places like this too that are, Amazon, those are not like your websites. Those are marketplaces, right? So you're doing them a favor by putting your product on their platform. And at the end of the day, a place like Amazon and Etsy, just because they're so big, and I don't really know if people are still selling handmade goods on eBay or not, but Amazon, Etsy, they're more like search engines nowadays. And the SEO game is completely different. And I know I'm going off tangent here, but there is a point to this. But the way that I started is Etsy, but Etsy 12 years ago versus what it is now is completely different. So you're going to have to remind me to talk about that because it is a different animal now. It was easier for me 12 years ago. So that's why I think it comes off as, oh, it was easy because back then it was a little bit easier than it is right now. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. It just was. But the next step from that is, okay, I can only do so much traction on Etsy. But the thing with Etsy or Amazon, your reviews are the things that sell your products. So obviously, if you're going to sell online, the biggest thing that I did, even from the very beginning, is I wanted the package to be an experience for people. So that was the thing I always did from the beginning. I mean, everything was wrapped like a present, right? And there was always a free sample. I was not a big fan of sales. Instead, I like to give away the product because my husband and I, because he would help me sell at the farmer's market, we said, if you just try it, you'll be back and you'll buy it. And it was always true. I mean, I don't think that ever didn't happen. And that was a double negative. So forgive me. But every time we gave somebody a sample of something, they would come back and they would buy more. And then they would become a rabid customer, which is a good thing. So having a farmer's market and then obviously having a card that had a website on it was a big deal. And things that people don't even think about. I know lots of people locally, because we're in a much smaller town, they'll have a booth at a farmer's market, but then people are like, okay, so where can I get this though? And they're like, here. But farmers markets don't go all year round. So you kind of have to have an online presence. So at least just having that Etsy store to start was pretty great. But then I was realizing that even in my reviews were saying, oh, I got this soap on Etsy. It's really great Etsy soap. And I'm like, but it's not Etsy. It's me. It's my brand. It's not Etsy. And this is me trying to figure things out in the age of like, I mean, my brain is a little mushy after so many years, but like YouTube was still pretty young, but that's essentially how I learned the things that I learned. And then it was just through trial and error. So I was realizing that I would rather people buy my brand and refer to it by its brand name. And so I decided to open my own shop on a platform, but I'm pretty sure Shopify existed, but it wasn't what it is now. So back then I used this like hosting website, which is very similar to GoDaddy. And it was kind of hot garbage, but it was just my first step into, okay, so, and of course I didn't know the words back then, but I was trying to develop my brand identity. And the way that I wanted to do it is I always knew that I noticed that all of the other soap makers around me and in my community, they sold primarily through fear. They sold with, the ingredients in these store-bought soaps, they're so bad for you. And they're just filled with toxins and toxins this and toxins that. Whereas I was like, look at how pretty and colorful my soaps are and they smell so good, So So it's more like when you use this bar of soap, it's going to make you happy, right? Like we all have to take showers. We all have to smell better after taking our showers. So why not use a little bit of happiness in your shower? And that was what I always went with, because that's what made me feel good when I sold it. Because the other thing is too, if you don't believe in what you're selling, or you don't believe the jargon that you're putting out there, you're not going to be able to sell it properly either. So I think a lot of this probably sounds easy because it's the way I just always thought. And it might have been my experience at places like Disney World, like learning everything that I possibly could from Disney. There's a lot of really good knowledge when you work for a company like that. Same with Whole Foods, and it was Whole Foods before Amazon bought it. So when you learn the lessons from the places that you've worked at, you don't forget them. And you think, okay, well, how can I be different? And that's something too. Like, yeah, every year when I sold at the farmer's market, I was one of 9 soap makers. And at the end of the year, I was the only soap maker left. And I had the most expensive bar of soap by $4 more than the second most expensive. So my bars of soap were $9 a bar, and the person next to me would sell $5 bars of soap or $4 bars of soap. And again, that's not how you make money, right? So I know I'm going all over the place, but back to the path that I took.
Yeah.
It's like when you take your path, it's more like this. It's never really just a straight line.
Well,
But
that's because nothing ever goes like you think it's going to.
right? Never, ever, ever. So, also, like, just truth be told, we had so I'm jumping from farmers market. I did the platform that sucked. And then I found Weebly and I was like, oh, well, it's drag and drop. I can kind of do my own thing. The whole time too, is I was super bootstrapping. I didn't borrow money. I didn't, every penny I made, I kind of put right back into the business. And every now and again, I'd take an owner draw to like put towards our bills. Right. But I never really, except for the end, paid myself a salary. I would just kind of take an owner draw from QuickBooks and be like, okay, we're going to just move this into the personal account. It's labeled as an owner draw, and then everything else goes right back into the business. And so when we moved to Oregon, I was actually getting ready to open a shop in Franklin, Tennessee, because it was super duper cute. If you've ever been there, it's a really cute downtown area where like this wintertime Dickens kind of show. I don't know. It's really cute. But we ended up moving because my husband got a job as a chef over at Bandon Dunes. And so we moved back, and shops were way cheaper in North Bend than they were in Franklin. And so I think I rented the shop for about $800 a month. And I knew that I could pay that just with the online sales that I was making. And if you ask me how much I was doing, I don't remember, but it was definitely enough to carry an $800 a month lease in addition to all of our other bills, because we had also just bought a house and all this other blah,
And then
blah, blah.
hold on, Tanya, okay, let's go back. How, like, for people who are sort of and they have their Etsy store and things like that. I just, people who are wanting to get into e-commerce, selling products, maybe they're making it like, what were some of the things that you did or that you learned, you can answer however you want to, around like the financial modeling, right? Like, did you just kind of throw a noodle at the wall and I'll charge this much and volume? I mean, but I think, as people kind of try to estimate what they need for startup costs, and then procuring the resources, and then the shipping and I got to get that thing printed, and, all of those kinds of go into dealing with e-commerce, with a delivery type of business.
Well, yeah. So as I had mentioned, my career was wearing many, many different hats. And even though I'm a creative, I'm also obsessed with data and numbers. And a lot of my jobs were managing other people's businesses, and a lot of it was managing their financials. So I was lucky enough to be one of those creatives that can not only do the creative side, but I was super into, okay, what is my budget going to be? I mean, from year one, I had a budget, but I understand that not everybody can do that. However, that's why the SBDC exists, right? Like all of these wonderful free programs all over the state of Oregon exist. That's why all of the programming that I'm offering exist. But so that's probably the first thing when I meet a new business owner is like, do you know that the SBDC exists? Because a lot of them do not. I'll be honest with you, when I moved to Coos Bay, I didn't know that they existed for the first 6 years I was here. So, and come to find out, my director of the SBDC here in Coos Bay, his name is Derek Tom, and he's like, well, we don't advertise because we don't really have enough people to deal with all of the people that come in. And I mean, I think that's just the way it is, right? Like sometimes, yes, thank you for that, Jason, Derek Tom. And he's awesome, by the way. So, and so he and I talk about this at length. It's like, when I found it and I found Mary, who is another person who's just indispensable. I can't believe that she was there when I got this job, but but when I met her, we put together the business plan. I already understood the financials, but a lot of people don't. But that is why the SBDC exists. You don't have to throw a bunch of money at the wall or an accountant, because a lot of us don't have that. A lot of us don't have that when we're startups. But again, SBDC exists. Here in Oregon, the CCD business development, they exist as well. I mean, there are so many resources that if you speak to one of us, so if you go and you speak to Jason, right? Jason, you're with the SBDC over in your, okay. So if you go and you speak to Jason, but maybe you need something that they can't necessarily offer, he's going to point you in the right direction as to where to go. So I feel like these things that I didn't know existed, I almost think it's easier in that kind of sense. I just got lucky because I already had the tools to make budgets and to know, okay, there's a break even point. And again, I didn't know the words. I mean, I guess I did, but I knew where I needed to go to break even. I knew that I needed to sell this many bars of soap in order to pay all of these bills. Like there are, something called fixed cost. Like you have to pay that no matter what, even if you don't sell a bar of soap for the month, right? And so I just knew that I put all of my numbers down. I knew what my COGS were. So my cost of goods sold. Every time you make something, like the ingredients that go into it cost something. And even though I wasn't paying myself a traditional salary, I was like, Tanya, if you were going to hire somebody, what would you pay them to do what you're doing? And so I gave that fictional person a salary. And then I added 18% to that because hello, payroll taxes. And I was like, okay, so, and then I chunked down, okay, so this is how long it takes me to make a batch of soap. You divide that by these big batches I was making, I could get 93 bars of soap out of one 30-pound batch. So it's like, okay, 93 bars of soap divided by this amount of time that it takes me, but I'm going to add more time to that because I've already been doing this for years. So there's a lot of math that goes into it that I'm a little tiny bit obsessed with. So I think that's why it was quote unquote easier for me. But if you're not me and you don't have the data numbers brain, then you utilize an SBDC or CCD or any of the other really great free services that exist all over the state of Oregon. So, and it's kind of why I'm doing these things too, because more and more people need to know that these things exist in our state. And there is a lot of it. And there are a lot of really great people that are like waiting to help you. So. Yeah.
What's something that you underestimated, you think, in implementing kind of e-commerce strategy? Well, I'd say as you evolved your e-commerce strategy, since you kind of hit the ground running, but what's something that somebody maybe wanting to expand or start out, but what comes to mind about something you maybe underestimated?
Underestimated with the e-commerce. So pictures. I know it's like such a small thing, but there's a lot to be said with the look of your website. And not to mention too, just because I got into this after the fact, but user experience, right? It's called UX design or user interface, right? These are things that all of us are aware of because we utilize our phones, right, Maria? Like you started this conversation on your phone and then you hopped over to your iPad. Well, there's something called, okay, so I'm also kind of into web development too. In web development, the new rule nowadays for the last however many years has been you need to design your website for mobile first because everyone and their brother is using their cell phone nowadays. Now, that is something I was unaware of back in 2012 because we weren't really using our phones back then for that purpose. But I do remember when it shifted and I was like, wait a second, when I look at my website on my new iPhone, this looks like crap. What am I going to do here? And so a lot of that was me. If I didn't know something, I mean, Google exists for a reason. So I would get on Google, or if Google didn't help me, I would go to YouTube, which is essentially Google, but for videos, and I would figure it out, right? And so I also remember too, when I made the decision to jump from Weebly to Shopify, it was because Weebly didn't allow me to do these things that I wanted to do, the user interface, the user experience. And when I say that, you think about your journey on a web page, right? And let's just equate it to your phone. I think nowadays it's called a hamburger menu when you're on your phone, and it's like 3 little lines, and you hit that, and then you get your menu of everything that you're looking at. The amount of sites that didn't have that back then, or it's called a breadcrumb trail, when you have like your little words like, okay, homepage to shoes to heels, right? And that's your breadcrumb. But all of these cute little user experience things that actually allow you to function on your website is very important. And now you go to the look of your website, which is just your pictures. Pictures matter. And nowadays, the tools that exist that are free are ridiculous. I tell every single new business owner that I meet, buy a pro subscription to Canva, because holy crap, the amount of stuff that you can do in Canva. I know Photoshop, I super hate Photoshop compared to what Canva is able to do right now. I use that for all of my photos. And then when it came to the point of, okay, I really want to expand, Shopify has like a good partnership with a business called Suna. That's let me type it in the chat here, SOONA. Where is my? Okay, so if somebody could type that in the chat, nothing is working on my computer right now. But it's SOONA. Suna, you can actually ship your products to them. And I believe it's like for $25 to $30 a picture. They're going to take several professional photos of your products, and then you can automatically upload them into Shopify. Or if you're not using Shopify, they still give you, thank you very much. I appreciate you, Jason. You can utilize them, have them saved to your Dropbox, whatever you use that is a Dropbox-like thing. And then you will have a very clear, cohesive website, because that's what you want. Even though my soaps were so unique and different looking, I really wanted the soaps to sell themselves. And when there's no like scratch and sniff screen, you're going to have to look at it, and it's going to have to kind of look the same. Like I wanted people to open my webpage and know that they were in my store online, because as we know right now, if you were to just Google handmade soap, the amount of hits it's ridiculous. The amount of handmade soap makers there are that exist in the world. But again, I'm also one of those people. There's room for all of us, by the way, because the world's quite large. Yeah, so you need to have a cohesive look across your website. Your branding, your brand identity, figuring that out is really difficult for people right now. In my region, we're teaching something called Co-Starters. It's a nationally recognized program where we take people it's Co-Starters Core is the program. We take them from week 1 is, are you even built to be an entrepreneur? Do you know what this actually takes? The amount of time that this takes. Can you do this? And then the second week is, who is your customer? And the businesses we're working with now, they've all been in business for a few years, and they wanted to choke me, I think, because I was trying to get them to dial down on the data that they already had. Most of these people have already been business owners for 2 to 3 years, and they could not tell me who their customer was. And I was like, what we're looking for is your ideal customer. This is the person that will go to your website or walk into your business, and no matter what you do, they're going to buy from you. You want to know who that person is. So this kind of work is how you find out what your brand messaging and your brand identity is. And I know it sounds like it's not part of e-commerce, but it absolutely is, because without this, you're going to have a failing e-commerce store. You need to have this cohesion, and it starts with the look of your store, your user experience, and then it all goes back to your brand identity and your messaging. And if you do not know who your customer is, your store's not going to do very well. And it is something that I worked on for many, many, many years. And I got to tell you, it's probably year 4 when I was like, oh, damn, I would not buy my own soap. Like, I love it and I won't use anything else, but I don't think I would spend $9 on a bar of soap. that's crazy talk, right? And so when I realized that, I was like, but you know what? That's okay. But you know who will? And then it's like, there are many different names for it. Ideal customer, customer avatar was something that I was used to using. A customer persona is another way to look at. Sorry, my dog is barking. Just ignore her. Anyway, so once you really know who your customer is, obviously the other thing is too, is that I have a couple people in this first cohort that we're teaching who thinks that everybody is their customer. And that's another rude awakening. Not everybody is your customer, and that's okay. You know, one of the gals that we are facilitating through this whole program right now, she sells $15 t-shirts and seems to think that she's in competition with Walmart. And I was like, no, like it's two completely different things.
Mhm.
You hand make your graphics, you hand press your shirts, you're not selling them for enough money. So we'll go back to that. But like, you are not in competition with a $5 shirt at Walmart. The people that are going to buy a $5 shirt at Walmart are not going to buy your $15 shirt at the farmer's market where you made it by hand.
So how, when you have, I mean, you're bringing up a lot of good points, right? Like have, you can have your Etsy store, but it really limits your ability to own the brand experience. So like having your own website, where you can control that brand experience, and it's, I guess, embedding, different platforms. How many platforms were you on, or did you start with just Etsy and then just focused on your website and then just going direct to like other distribution partners? What kind of did that growth path look like for you?
So I mentioned earlier that I did more than just retail, right? What I sold was a CPG, consumer product good. Okay. Not only that, but like it was reusable, not reusable, but you needed to replenish it. So my brain is blanking on what that's called, but people needed to come back and keep buying the soap if they wanted to keep using the soap. So with that said, I knew that retail was an option, but I also saw that some of my other soap maker friends were selling their soaps in other stores. And I was like, how the hell did that happen? Right. And so at the time, it no longer exists. But while I was on Etsy years and years and years ago, Etsy launched something called Etsy Wholesale, which was the very first, as far as I know, the very first online way to sell your goods via wholesale. And another hard and fast rule, it doesn't mean it. So as far as wholesale is concerned, it doesn't matter what you may think what wholesale is. I just want to put this out here because I have to say this a lot to people. Wholesale is your retail price, but 50% off of your retail price. So if your numbers are not in line, you cannot sell wholesale. You have to be able to know that you can sell wholesale. And people that might be seeing this is like, well, that's ridiculous. I would never discount my product by 50%. Well, wholesale works a little bit differently. Retail, you're probably selling one or two things, right? But with wholesale, you're selling it in a greater quantity, right? And probably not making as much that you would think. Okay, I'm trying to think of a way to say this where it doesn't sound like a crazy person is saying it. Too late. Okay, so it's a much larger quantity that they're paying, right? So a single retail sale, I'd probably get like $24 sale. I would do 3 packs, right? 3 soaps for $24. But what you're really selling for wholesale is you'll hear minimum orders for wholesale. Mm-hmm. And so my minimum order at the time of Etsy wholesale was like, I think it was $200. So they had to spend $200 with me before they could even order. So yes, it was a greater quantity, but once you move into that, this is where you're going to need an SBDC or an accountant that can help you get here. But you have to realize, okay, so if I start purchasing my ingredients in bulk, right? Maybe I can save money, and you can save money. So when you are able to buy like a pallet of coconut oil, which I have been there, then you save a lot more money. Your bar price goes way down. And so that's kind of when you welcome wholesale, right? And I'm saying this because wholesale was a big part of my e-commerce journey. And for anybody that has a product similar to mine, you're going to want a wholesale it. So you need to make sure your numbers are in line. The other thing is too, okay, so we live in a rural community, and this is something I'm trying to share with others. If you have somebody that is comparable to you, or like maybe, like, believe it or not, most soap makers are pretty chill. So if you're friends with another soap maker and say, hey, you know what, we both use coconut oil in our soap. What if we put our funds together and we ordered a ton of coconut oil together so we could drive our bar price down a little bit and save some money overall, so we can make a little bit more money, not only on our retail sales, but obviously on our wholesale sales. And yes, I know I'm all over the place, but there's a point here. So once you can do something like that, add another revenue stream. I decided from that point, Etsy retail for me, once I had my own website, I just didn't care enough. I mean, I know that's terrible, but I just wasn't trying as hard because I was losing my brand identity on Etsy. So I sent an email to all of my hardcore Etsy people and said, okay, here you go. I hate doing it, but here's 20% off of $45 or more, right? That's another good way too. If you're going to do a sale, like, do it off of a certain amount. So no matter what, you're getting at least $45, right? And they all followed me over to my own website, and I shut down my Etsy store because it was too important for me to have my separate brand. So I really only had Etsy for like maybe 5 or 6 years, because again, it is a marketplace. It is not you or your brand. You really don't get to control the user experience. Etsy controls that. And I was making more money paying Shopify versus paying all of the different fees on Etsy. So once I did that, Etsy wholesale shut down. So I was like, oh crap, how am I going to sell wholesale? Because now there's not this super handy dandy online forum. And Indigo Fair, which is now called Fair, Faire. Actually, Fair saved me after the pandemic, by the way. But they are now Etsy wholesale, but about 1 billion times better.
Oh, they're
I
massive.
will say,
Massive.
yeah. So yeah. You look, and going back to pictures, if you do not have a cohesive look to your product, you don't have like pictures that look amazing, and you don't have a good brand identity, they will not accept you. I was one of those rare people where they called me and asked me to join, and I was like, I don't know you. And I refused to join Fair for at least 2 years, because I'm like, well, this other lady, she told me to have independent sales reps and to put my wholesale products in these, gosh darn it, what were they called? Oh, like physical marketplaces done for wholesalers. Like, I can't remember the name, you guys. It's late. It's been a really long day, but I sold my wholesale physically and through actual like human people, and I lost money doing that. That is the old way of selling your products wholesale. Also, when you sell wholesale that way, you're crossing your fingers and hoping you get paid, because most of the people that buy from you expect to pay you within 30 to 45 days, sometimes longer. And truth be told, I worked with big box stores, and I have several big box stores that owe me thousands of dollars after the pandemic. I'm never going to see that money again. So that's another thing. But Fair and Shopify, having my own brand identity between both, made a huge difference, because yes, I would have my retailers buy from me through Fair, but they still knew that it was me because my branding was still very much so on point. So I don't know. I went all over the place trying to answer that question.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to talk about. I want to keep an eye on time too here. Just a couple more, two really more questions. One, I don't know if there's kind of a succinct way to address this, but white labeling, like, that sounds probably very attractive, right? White labeling, but it's like, how do I find like a hotel chain or somebody's going to white label my product? Like, is there a third party service, or like, how did that work for you?
So honestly, I did all of my private label through Fair. I created my own listings. And the only reason why I did is because I was listening to my customer. I had so many people on Fair message me individually saying, I love your soap, but I want to sell it under my own brand. How would I even do that? And so I was trying to do that on the side. But the thing about Fair is that they paid me. I didn't have to worry about people not paying me, right? So I was like, well, screw it. I'm just going to use Fair's system and post private label through Fair. Before that, though, the way to do it was, I mean, I went in person. I would send postcards with a package of my product. But the thing of it is, when you start going to, like, say, hotel chains, you have to be doing an obscene amount of quantity to make any money on that. Something like my product, as expensive and higher end as it was, because the other thing is too, I mean, not to be too much of a hippie about it, but I wanted to keep my carbon footprint very, very small. So all of my ingredients I sourced from the state of Oregon. I would not buy ingredients outside of the state of Oregon. So if you know this at all, that's expensive. So, I couldn't do that. I actually spoke with Bandon Dunes about utilizing my soap in their rooms, but they wanted to pay me cost for that, which means I would have made $0 and totally not worth my time or my employees' time at, that time. There's a lot of usage of the time, but yeah, a lot of that is word of mouth. It's really getting your products into stores. People will see you. For me, it just happened. People would reach out to me. I would do my whole bars of soap all over the state of Oregon and like really cutesy Airbnbs, but people would just pay my wholesale price for it and they would take the full bars. I also learned early on, at least for me and the type of person that I am, I stopped doing custom orders about 4 years in because I never made them happy. It didn't matter what I did. Their expectations were not aligned with reality. There's a lot of chemistry that goes into soap making. Like, for example, if you have a vanilla fragrance, it's going to turn your soap brown. There is literally nothing I can do about that. That is just the chemistry of how that works. And the amount of people that would want to argue with me and like demand it to be a light pink. I'm like, it's not going to be, it's going to be brown. And they made me do it anyway. And then they would be mad because it turned brown, right? Like, little tiny things like that I just did not enjoy doing because those people literally sucked the life out of me, that I was like, custom is not for me. So what I will do is I will do what I'm doing well. So private label, right? I was like, this is what I offer for private label. I will not be making your product the way you want it. I will private label my product the way I make it. And even with those parameters, I still could barely keep up with the amount of private label orders I was getting. And on Fair, especially once you're in, you're in. Like, so I would just say, if you're on Fair, just start private labeling your product that way. And then you'll get more and more people reaching out and you say, go to Fair and buy from me there. So
and then it's very reputable. It's very credible sounding if you're selling your brand on Fair because there's phenomenal. I mean, it is so much fun stuff. Okay, I want to keep an eye on time here. We probably should wrap up. There's so many things we could ask you. I guess.
Nicole, can I ask a question real quick?
Yes, Jason. Please ask a question.
Hi, Tanya. I know that you talked a little bit about like your customer base and how you started that. How are you maintaining customers now? What does that retention look like? And how are you?
I'm not, because it's my business.
But how are you attracting new customers, especially in e-commerce, which is, a very competitive space. So
absolutely. So back when I did have my business, it costs a lot less money to keep the customers you already have than it does to gain a new customer. But as far as keeping the customers, I had an 86% reorder rate on my website. So the crazy amount of money I was making online, 86% of those sales were my repeat customers. So the way that I kept them, obviously I had a loyalty program, and with almost any kind of e-commerce platform nowadays, there are plugins to have your own loyalty program do it. Even if you think you might be annoying people, you are crazy if you don't have one, because people have actually come to expect those. So if you don't have one, get one. And even if it costs a little bit each month, it's totally worth it because you will garner a lot of people that way. Another thing that I did on my Shopify store is I had as an e-commerce person, you're competing with Amazon. You're competing with free shipping. No matter what, you need to figure out what your break-even point is in order to offer free shipping. And where I'm located, I am so far away from the I-5 corridor that shipping cost was ridiculous for me. So even within my own town, it would cost for a typical package that I would ship was probably about 8 pounds, right? Because soap is heavy. And so in order to ship that just like down the street, it would cost me $9. But I needed to figure that out. Like, what is my break even point for where I'm shipping the most, so I can offer free shipping, because that is another way to keep and or get customers. So if people were looking at my soap shop versus another soap shop that didn't offer any version of free shipping, then they would buy from me. And so that is the way to get a new customer, perhaps. But as far as new ones, they're very difficult nowadays because there's a lot of noise that exists. And I would say before the pandemic, it was a lot easier to find people on social media. It's a lot harder nowadays. I almost feel like you need to be out shaking hands and kissing babies to find new people. Or what we did too within our own loyalty program is that we had like a friends discount or a friends and family discount, where if you brought in a new customer to us and they reordered, then you would get like this special little gift. Like, you just kind of have to get creative to get more people in. And word of mouth is what grew my business. It wasn't really Facebook. It wasn't really Instagram. I mean, we did well there, but I didn't have a lot of time to deal with that nonsense. So instead, it was more so utilizing all of the tools within your e-commerce platform. And I know I've talked about Shopify a lot, but I'm kind of a fangirl of Shopify. I think it's one of the best ones for the type of product that I was doing. But the loyalty program mixed in with the free shipping, if you don't know what that break-even point is for you, you need to figure it out. You need to figure out what your average order is. So my average order price was $53. So on average, people would spend $53 when they hit my website. So knowing that, I was like, okay, so but then how much was the shipping for that $53 order, right? I'm not going to get into the math of it all, but figuring out what your break even for that will allow you to offer free shipping. And no matter what, you have to, because you are competing with Amazon and there's just no other way around it. Unless Amazon dies, and I don't think it ever will, you have to figure it out. And then that just goes back to know your numbers. The other way too is that actually, and people will tell you it's dead and they are absolutely wrong, email marketing. It is still huge. You have to find that like happy little medium between there are some companies that will email me like 4 times a day. That is a bit much. Maybe just like what we would do is we had a welcome email series, right? So you would sign up, you would get your like, here's 15% off, because that's the thing, right? Like to suck them in to your email list, you have to give away something. So I would say 15% off your first order. And so then they would order. And then like I had said before, you use the soap, you're going to keep buying the soap. So consumable. That's the word. Soap is a consumable, so people will want to keep reordering. Anyway, so then the secondary email is going to be like, okay, so this is why my soap is slightly different than some other, like Dove, right? And it wouldn't be me demonizing Dove. It would just be me saying, here are all the great benefits of this bar of soap that you're getting. And then I'd be like a little like tongue-in-cheek and snarky and funny, like in the emails. Like my personality, I chucked into the messaging of the emails. And then the third one is just using the kind of AI that's built in, like, okay, so this is what they've been looking, it's almost like remarketing. So they've been looking at the website, and if you have like a very good integration between Shopify or whatever platform and your email service, which all of them do this now, it will remarket the things that your people are looking at. So on that third email, it'd be like, hey, it's been a minute since you got a bar of soap. How about these? Because these are pretty awesome and very comparable to what you got. And so it's just kind of being yourself when you market, not being kind of a robot, and just making sure you're utilizing the tools at your disposal. And the fun thing is about the email marketing is you can 100% be yourself and still kind of have it somewhat automated. And then the thing with it was very seasonal, the soaps that came out. I definitely had like, this is going to sound insane, but I had 35 year-round fragrances, but then I would add like 15 every season that people would use. And then we would bring back some of the old ones. And so there's a lot of nostalgia built in as well. And the way to let people know that you're doing that is via email. And for me, I never emailed people more than bi-weekly because I felt like that's what I could deal with. And I grew my email list out to 30,000. Like it was ridiculous the amount of people I had on that when I sold it. That's what made my business valuable, were the amount of leads that I had at the end. So I think those three things are probably the most important. You have to figure out a way to do free shipping, have to have a loyalty program. And then I'm a big fan of email list. And if you don't know how to write them, utilize Chad. I call Chat GPT Chad. I've personified him because I use him all the time. But get Chad to learn who you are as a person, write your own kind of like way that you would speak into AI, and have him help you with all of that. All of these tools exist now that didn't exist back then. You can even use it for social media marketing. I just don't feel like social media marketing is as worth it anymore. I know that brands kind of feel like they have to be on there. And I think to an extent, yes, you're right. You do. But the money I was spending during the pandemic and for years afterwards, I might as well just be putting it in a pile and setting it on fire, because there were too many people competing for eyeballs, and it's still like that. So it's difficult.
yeah.
It's almost like you have to figure out that word of mouth kind
It's
of
very
selling.
expensive. I mean, that's part of the hustle, is what can you do that you don't have to pay for?
Oh, I did not. I just got it. Okay. So last question. What advice do you have for someone just starting out? Start small. Firstly, just start is probably the biggest thing. There are so many reasons not to do something that you're just not going to do it, right? But if you want to do something and it's like this fire, you wake up every single morning and you're like, I have to do this. It's the first thing you think about when you wake up. It's the last thing you think about when you go to bed. You dream about it. Just start it. But also, it doesn't have to be fully formed. I kind of changed and pivoted to what people wanted. I always listened to the people. I would have ideas and I would try them, and they didn't always land, and so I just kind of learned from that and just kept pivoting. And I was like, all right, so y'all didn't care for this, so what's the thing you do want? And through all the noise, I would hear what was the loudest, and that's what I would do. But just know, when you're first starting, you don't have to have it all figured out. Like, you will keep moving along. It will continue to grow whether you're ready for it or not. Just take it easy on yourself, and just do it, Nike. And then B, like, I don't know, start small. You don't have to have everything right out the gate. Like, the amount of people that think that they have to have everything done and ready and perfect, it does not have to be. If you would have seen where I started and where I ended, it was like night and day. You would have been like, why the hell did anybody ever buy from you? And trust me, I thought those same things. But you have to start somewhere, and you're not going to start with this perfectly formed, beautiful business. It's going to grow into that. And every year you're going to look back and just be like, what the hell was that? And then you're just going to keep moving forward instead of beating yourself up. One other quick thing that I always did for myself, just to stay a little bit sane, is at the beginning of every year, you know how people do those resolution nonsensical things? I'm not a journaler, but what I would do is I would take a random little journal that I would keep on my bed table and forget about until January of every year. And I would write, here are the 5 things I want to accomplish this year. And I would write it out, and I would see if I did it, right? And so I'd go back, and I would go back into that thing every year and go back to every single year that I did it. And I'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. Things that I wrote down that I thought were unattainable, I would write down. And then I would notice that, oh, I tried this, but it didn't work. And here's why. You're learning from your past self. So it's like goal setting, right? But I literally would only look at it once a year. And then there is one more thing. Keep your eyes on your own paper. Too many people are obsessed with like their competition. Don't be obsessed with your competition. You need to figure out who you are and who your people are, and then you'll be fine. And then that's it. I talk a lot. Sorry.
No, that's great. I don't know if you can hear me now or if I'm cutting out again.
I'm going to turn my speaker. Oh, there we go. Now I can hear you.
Is that better?
On my speaker. Yeah.
I love that. Keep your eyes on your own paper. We can have similar ideas as entrepreneurs, but I always say no one's going to do it the way you do it. right? I mean, we all have kind of our own flavor. Um, Tanya, thank you so much. I actually am going to stop the recording at this time.